Good morning guys, and welcome to the PhD vlog day 24. I am currently walking to London Bridge station. So I'm on my way to university because I have an end of term meeting about my teaching, just to kind of discuss with my head of department how everything went and give some feedback on the course and get some feedback on my teaching, etc. Okay, you'll be pleased to know that I managed to get to my teaching meeting on time and it went really well. I got some good feedback from my students for teaching this term. I think my head of department is happy with how I'm going, and I was able to give some good kind of comments about my experiences and what I thought should be similar or different next year in the course. So that went really well. And then I spent the morning working on my first conference paper, and I am now halfway through that, so I'm certainly on track to finish today. I am just heading out to get a coffee. It's 4:15 and I've been working well on my conference paper. I'm pretty happy with my progress. I've got 1,000 words to go, so I think that I can get that done today, which will be good. It'll be a weight off my shoulders to have the first one written. So this is going to be delivered next Tuesday, and I like to have my conference papers written at least a week in advance generally, just so I can practice them and keep tinkering with them. If the conference paper is not from something that I've already written, I would certainly write it a lot earlier and get someone else to read it, but because I've shown the chapter on which this paper is based to quite a few people, I'm feeling confident with the argument itself. It's just a matter of getting the words in the right form for oral presentation rather than for written presentation. You can tell that it's 4 o'clock on a work day because all the PhD students in the ICS are drinking coffee, and Jeff's even bought some to take home. And good evening guys, it's a bit wet and miserable at the moment, and I am sans umbrella, so sorry about the big hood. It's now 6:20 and I'm leaving the library now. I'm just shy of finishing the conference paper. Rather than continue working, I thought, given that, yesterday I missed that conference because of mismanagement, I should maybe try and do some shorter days and get a bit more sleep. So I thought I'd leave around 6:30, get home for dinner, and then maybe do a little bit of work on the paper at home after I've had a shower and I'm nice and comfortable, rather than staying kind of the cold deserted library until all hours. Yeah, so that's why I am leaving at this stage. The conference paper is coming along really well. I will tell you a little bit more about it when I get home, but I'm quite happy with how it looks so far. So I'm now coming to you from home, and I thought I would sign off today by telling you a bit more about my conference papers and the kind of process that I go through when I write a conference paper, because I thought that might be useful. And if you have tips about writing conference papers or your strategy differs vastly to mine, then let me know, because I'm sure it would be useful to kind of pool resources and to share different strategies and methods. So, as I mentioned in my earlier vlog, I've got 2 conference papers coming up. Luckily, they are both about the content that I speak about in chapter 3. So they're both about Martin Crimp's Greek tragedy adaptations, which makes it easier for me because I'm working on the same content for both papers, and I'm utilising the same chapter of my thesis, so my mind isn't in multiple areas, which is always a positive. This is the first time I've spoken about this bit of my research at a conference, so that's quite exciting. And they're 2 very different events that I'm speaking at. So the first one is a conference about Martin Crimp as a translated playwright, and I was asked to give a paper specifically about Martin Crimp's role as a translator or an adapter of Greek tragedy. Now this conference, I was asked to write a 70 to 100 word abstract. So this is my abstract here. It's like not even a paragraph, and then this is the bio down the bottom. Now this is exceptionally short, so I didn't get much space to plan what I wanted to speak about, which makes it harder when you go to write the paper because you don't have that kind of structure that you've already said that you're going to speak about. For my second paper, which is at the Classical Association annual conference, that was a normal abstract, so I think it's a 300 word abstract for the CA. It's either 2 or 3, so it's a much larger abstract. and so I have a much clearer structure already set out for myself. Yeah, so they're the two abstracts that I'm working with. One, I was asked to speak about something in particular. The other, I submitted an abstract, so I was kind of pitching myself. My general advice regarding conference papers is to get a lot of practice at it. So to practice writing abstracts and delivering papers. When I started my PhD, I think my kind of aim was to just kind of give one a year. I've given 2 papers before I started my PhD, and I gave my first paper during my PhD just 2 months after I'd started. And after that, I kind of thought I'd try and do one a year. In the second year of my PhD, I gave a lot of papers, so that kind of flew out the window. But I don't regret that. I think it was great practice to kind of gain skills presenting research, and it's really nerve-wracking giving papers and dealing with question time, and I still get nervous, so I really appreciate that I've now got a bit more experience under my belt and I kind of know what questions I'm likely to anticipate and how to deal with difficult questions, because it's definitely a skill that you need to learn, and I've still got a way to go, but at least I'm kind of getting some practice. Okay, so there's a lot of material online about how to write a conference abstract, and I don't think there's any one correct way, but I'm going to link in the info bar below to some of the blogs that I've used for delivering papers. And alongside those, I've certainly, used my colleagues and my supervisor, asked people to read things. I definitely think that the most important thing to do is to get people to look at it and to give yourself a lot of time to write an abstract, because it is an art form to be able to condense something into just a very small number of words. And on that note, I think that I should add that for me personally, my strategy is not to condense a great volume of material into a conference paper. So I've never given a paper where I've tried to speak about an entire chapter of my thesis. I always try and pick a particular angle and go into a bit more depth. So in terms of the depth that I'm going into for these papers, in the one that I'm working on right now, I'm looking at Martin Crimp's engagement with ancient Greek for his adaptation of Sophocles' Trachiniae, which was called Cruel and Tender. And so he's quite unusual in that he's on record talking about how his play responds to the metrical patterns in the ancient Greek. And so I'm looking at exactly how Crimp interpreted the Greek, what he was responding to, and how we can use that interpretation to shed light back onto the Greek text. And it's been an interesting conference paper to write, because I am talking about kind of translation engagements, translation style engagements at an event which is not for classicists. So it's a theatre studies conference about Martin Crimp. It's been quite difficult because I'm showing some Greek text on the slide, but obviously no one in the audience will be able to read Greek, so I'm having to kind of jig my brain into thinking about how to present that to a non-specialist audience, which is an exciting challenge and something I'm really looking forward to. In contrast, the other paper, I'm talking more about the way Cruel and Tender was used to reflect on the War on Terror in 2004, and the way Martin Crimp's second Greek adaptation, which was an adaptation of Euripides' Phoenissae, was used to look more broadly at kind of contemporary socio-political situations in a very implicit way. So the production was kind of set very atemporally, perhaps in the future. I will link to the production below so you can find out a bit more about it. And it certainly didn't engage in any specific context, but it implicitly invoked various things. So in the second paper, I'm going to look at the kind of way you can explicitly or implicitly engage with something through an adaptation of a Greek tragedy. You'll kind of have figured that I'm working on these papers quite quickly, so I'm basically giving myself 2 to 3 days for each paper, and that's unusual for me. Usually I will put aside a week to work on a conference paper, especially if I'm doing it around teaching and things like that. But I don't feel that I need so much time for this one because my chapter is very solid, so the research on which it's based is very solid. My plan going forward is to finish this paper early tomorrow and my PowerPoint for the paper. So I'm doing a PowerPoint, and I generally find PowerPoints quite useful because I don't like to read my papers too closely. I do write full papers, so some people can talk just off dot points. And if I give a lecture or I'm teaching, I don't write it all out. I will have just dot points that I will freely talk from. But for an academic conference, I do like to write things out carefully and to make sure I have a fully written paper for two reasons. One, in case I want to share it with anyone, so in case I want to send it to someone. And two, I just feel like it's a bit of a safety net for me. I like to have everything there. But I also often will do a PowerPoint which will enable me to then talk off the paper, so not to read it, but to talk a little bit more freely around the paper through the PowerPoint while still holding on to the paper. So if I feel I get lost, I can definitely just go back to my points and I have everything spelled out nice and clearly. So I'm doing a PowerPoint. I'm not a big handout person, but that's, I think, because I mainly work on performance reception, so I'm talking about the mise-en-scène and things like that, which is very, it's about invoking visuals rather than closely dealing with text. So if I do give a paper which talks about a Greek text, I'm more likely to have a handout. But I do think those kind of things, a handout or a PowerPoint, are quite good in terms of just giving you a little something to latch on to. I hope you've had a good day, and I will look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. See you later. Bye.